Silverbrook, Connecticut, looked like it had been polished for the day. The streets around St. Eliza Cathedral were blocked off by black SUVs, velvet ropes, and security men who wore the same expression: "Nothing gets through." Cameras hid behind tinted windows. Guests arrived in designer coats and shoes that clicked like confidence on the stone steps. Inside, the cathedral smelled of lilies and expensive perfume. Rows of white roses ran like a river toward the altar. Above, stained glass saints watched the rich gather beneath their painted eyes. A string quartet played softly, each note floating into the vaulted ceiling like a prayer that money had purchased. This was not a wedding. It was a public announcement. At the front stood Nathaniel Cross, tall, clean-cut, his tuxedo fitted like armor. His jaw was sharp, his hair perfectly trimmed, and his gaze never wandered. People admired that about him. He looked like a man who made decisions and never regretted them. The Cross Empire had swallowed half the skyline of 3 states. Apartments, tech firms, private equity. He had bought distressed buildings and turned them into gleaming towers. He had bought struggling companies and turned them into headlines. The media called him brilliant. His rivals called him ruthless. His admirers called him inevitable. Today he was marrying Isabella Moore, the kind of woman who moved like she was followed by photographers even when she wasn't. She came from a family that placed their names on libraries and hospital wings. She smiled with elegance and spoke with certainty. To the world, they were perfect, the billionaire and the beauty, power, and polish, a future that would look good on magazine covers. The front pews were filled with politicians, celebrities, CEOs, and old money families who knew each other's secrets but still toasted each other's success. Their laughter was soft, practiced, and carefully contained. The priest began, his voice calm and ceremonial. The crowd leaned forward as if watching history. Nathaniel held his hands together, steady. Isabella's veil shimmered when she moved her head. Everyone waited for the moment that would be posted, reposted, and remembered. Then the cathedral doors slammed open. The sound cracked through the quiet like a gunshot. Heads snapped toward the entrance. The quartet stopped mid-note. A ripple of confusion ran through the pews, an offended, disbelieving wave, as if the room itself couldn't accept that perfection had been interrupted. A girl stood in the doorway. She looked like she didn't belong on the same planet as these people. Her dress was torn at the hem and faded to the color of old paper. Her feet were bare, dirty from the street. Her hair, blonde, once pretty, hung in tangled strands around her face. She was thin, too thin, with sharp collarbones and cheeks that had forgotten what fullness felt like. Even her breathing looked like effort. But her eyes were the most shocking thing. Blue. Bright. Furious. Not the glazed eyes of a person who had surrendered, but the burning stare of someone who had survived too much to be afraid of anyone in the room. 2 security guards started toward her immediately, hands moving to their earpieces, ready to drag her out. The guests murmured, annoyed. "Who is that? Is this some stunt? Oh my God, keep her away from the bride." The girl took 1 step forward, then another, and she raised her voice so loudly it bounced off the cathedral walls. "Nathaniel Cross." The name hit the room like thunder. Nathaniel's body went still. For a fraction of a second, he looked like a man who had been pulled out of a dream. His eyes narrowed, then widened, as if his mind was flipping through locked doors he hadn't opened in years. The girl pushed forward. The guards reached for her arms. "Don't touch me!" she shouted, twisting out of their grip with surprising strength. "He needs to look at me." The priest froze, unsure whether to speak or run. Isabella's smile vanished. Her face tightened into disbelief, then disgust. "Get her out of here," Isabella hissed, the words sharp like a blade. Nathaniel didn't move. His gaze stayed on the girl, fixed, pale, haunted. Because he knew her. It wasn't possible, and yet it was. Emily Carter. A name he had buried. A face he had forced himself to forget. A person he had convinced himself belonged to a past life, a poor life, a life he had escaped. Emily walked down the aisle, barefoot on cold stone, as if the pain under her feet meant nothing compared to the weight in her chest. With every step, the cathedral felt smaller, like the walls were pressing in. Guests leaned away from her as if poverty were contagious. Emily stopped halfway down the aisle and pointed at Nathaniel, her finger trembling. "You thought you could erase me," she said. Her voice shook, but it didn't break. "You thought if you got rich enough, you wouldn't hear my name again." Nathaniel's throat tightened. His hands unclasped and clenched at his sides. Isabella turned to him sharply. "Nathaniel," she whispered, forced calm, "who is she?" Nathaniel opened his mouth, but no words came. Emily swallowed, her eyes flashing with tears that refused to fall. "You left me," she said. "You left me when I was—" She stopped, breathing hard, as if the memory itself stole air from her lungs. "When I was carrying your child." The cathedral gasped. A sound like a collective choking. Isabella's head snapped back toward Nathaniel. What did she just say? Nathaniel's face drained of color. He looked suddenly younger, less untouchable, like the man under the billionaire skin was still capable of fear. Emily stepped closer, anger and heartbreak pouring out of her like a flood. "I was 19, she continued. "I worked 2 jobs. I paid for rent while you chased your future. I believed in you when no one else cared. And when I told you I was pregnant, you disappeared." The room was silent now. Even the air felt frozen. Nathaniel's lips parted. "Emily," he managed, voice rough. Emily laughed once, bitterly. "You remember my name. How convenient." Isabella moved forward, her veil fluttering. "This is insane," she snapped. "Security." Emily didn't look at her. She only stared at Nathaniel, as if no one else existed. "I didn't come here for money," Emily said. "I came here because I needed you to see me. Not the headlines. Not the empire. Me." Tears finally slid down her cheeks, cutting clean lines through the dirt on her face. "You built your life on the bones of what you destroyed," she whispered. Nathaniel's eyes glistened. For the first time, he looked unsteady, like the ground beneath his polished shoes had cracked. Emily's shoulders shook. She swayed slightly, as if her body could only hold her rage for so long. Then her legs buckled. She collapsed onto the marble floor, the sound of her body hitting stone echoing through the cathedral. A scream ripped from someone's throat, maybe a guest, maybe Isabella. Nathaniel stepped forward instinctively, shock breaking his stillness. He dropped to his knees beside Emily, his hands hovering over her like he didn't know if he had the right to touch her. "Emily," he said, panic surging into his voice. "Emily, wake up." Her eyelids fluttered, then fell shut. A thin streak of blood slid from her nose onto the white marble. The wedding, this perfect, powerful spectacle, shattered in an instant. And Nathaniel Cross, the man who never lost control, stared at the poor girl on the floor and realized something terrifying. His past hadn't died. It had been waiting. The sirens arrived faster than anyone expected. Maybe it was because Silverbrook's wealthy district always got quick service. Maybe it was because the cathedral had security connected to the city's best emergency response. Or maybe it was because when a girl collapsed in front of Connecticut's most powerful billionaire, the world suddenly decided her life mattered. Nathaniel barely heard the commotion around him. The wedding guests were on their feet now, some whispering, some filming, some shocked, some thrilled at the scandal unfolding in real time. Isabella stood frozen near the altar, her mouth slightly open, her eyes burning with humiliation. But Nathaniel was on his knees beside Emily, staring at her pale face like it was a ghost he'd been praying would never return. Her skin was cold when he finally touched her wrist to feel for a pulse. It was there. Weak, but there. "Don't move her!" someone shouted. 2 paramedics pushed through the crowd with a stretcher. They knelt beside Emily, checking her breathing, shining a small light into her eyes. One of them frowned. "She's malnourished," the paramedic muttered. This isn't just fainting. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. He wanted to ask 100 questions. Where she'd been, why she was like this, how she had survived, but his throat felt sealed. He stood as they lifted Emily onto the stretcher. Her head rolled slightly, hair falling across her cheek. The movement was so small, so fragile, that it made Nathaniel's stomach twist. His hand reached out without permission. He brushed the hair away from her face. It was then he saw it clearly, the bruising near her temple, faint but noticeable. The cracked dryness of her lips. The sharpness of her bones beneath her skin. It wasn't just poverty. It was suffering. And every inch of it felt like it had his name on it. "Sir," one of the guards said, nervous, "we should escort you back." "No," Nathaniel snapped, louder than intended. "I'm going with her." Isabella's voice cut through the room like glass. "Nathaniel, are you out of your mind? Our wedding." He turned toward her, and for the first time since he'd met her, Isabella looked frightened. Not because he raised his voice, but because his eyes held something she had never seen before. Guilt. Real guilt. "This isn't a wedding anymore," Nathaniel said, voice low. "It's a lie. And I'm done standing inside it." Isabella's face flushed deep red. "You're humiliating me," she whispered. Nathaniel stared at her, and though he should have cared, though he normally cared about reputation more than air, he felt nothing. Emily was being wheeled out of the cathedral. That was the only reality that mattered. He walked after the stretcher, ignoring the cameras, the gasps, the whispers. Outside, cold air slammed into him. The sun was still shining, but the day no longer felt bright. He followed the paramedics into the ambulance, and the door shut behind him with a heavy finality. As the vehicle sped away, Nathaniel pressed his palms against his knees, breathing hard like he was the one collapsing. Emily lay strapped to the stretcher, eyes closed, her chest rising and falling faintly. The paramedic adjusted an 4-line, hooking fluids into her arm. "She's dehydrated," the paramedic said, not looking at Nathaniel. "Very. She needs care immediately." Nathaniel swallowed. "Is she going to die?" The paramedic hesitated, then shrugged slightly. "If she doesn't get help, yes. People don't pass out like that unless the body's already been screaming for a long time." Nathaniel's vision blurred for a second. A long time. 8 years. 8 years of not knowing. Or worse, choosing not to know. The ambulance turned sharply. Nathaniel steadied himself, his eyes never leaving Emily. He remembered her differently. He remembered her laughing in the kitchen of their tiny apartment in Brookhaven, Ohio, hair pinned up messily, wearing one of his oversized shirts. He remembered her dancing to cheap radio music while stirring pasta, making jokes about his future billionaire attitude when he got frustrated at his laptop. He remembered her hands, small, always warm, on his face when he doubted himself. "You can do it," she'd say. "You're smarter than the world thinks." And he had believed her. He had used her belief like fuel. But fuel burns. And when it was gone, he'd thrown the container away. The ambulance pulled into Silverbrook Medical Center. The doors opened. A rush of nurses and hospital staff surrounded the stretcher. Nathaniel climbed out, trying to keep up as they rolled Emily through the automatic doors. Someone asked him, "Are you family?" Nathaniel froze. Family. He didn't deserve that word. His voice cracked. I know her." They didn't wait for details. They pushed Emily into an emergency room. Nathaniel was left outside behind a set of swinging doors, staring at the sign that read authorized personnel only like it was a judgment. Minutes passed like hours. A nurse eventually approached him with a clipboard. "We need her information," she said. "Name, age." Nathaniel swallowed. "Emily Carter. 19. No, she'd be 27 now." The numbers made him flinch. "I don't know her current address." The nurse's eyes softened, but only slightly. "Do you know if she has insurance?" Nathaniel's throat tightened. Insurance. Address. Stability. He had all of those in excess. Emily had none. "No," he said quietly. "But put everything under my name. I'll pay." The nurse nodded and walked away, as if she'd heard those words from powerful men 1,000 times. Nathaniel sank into a waiting chair, elbows on his knees. His hands trembled slightly. He didn't tremble. Not in boardrooms. Not during hostile takeovers. Not when millions were on the line. But a poor girl collapsing at his wedding had undone him more than any financial threat ever could. A doctor came out about 40 minutes later, removing gloves. "Are you Nathaniel Cross?" the doctor asked. Nathaniel stood immediately. "Yes." "We stabilized her," the doctor said. "But she's in very bad shape. Severe malnutrition, dehydration, and signs of long-term stress. Possibly untreated injuries." Nathaniel's chest tightened. "Can I see her?" The doctor studied him. "Who are you to her?" Nathaniel stared at the floor, then back up. "I'm the reason she's here." The doctor's expression turned guarded. "That isn't an answer." Nathaniel's voice lowered. "I used to be someone important to her." The doctor exhaled. "She's conscious now, but weak. If you upset her, we'll ask you to leave." "I won't," Nathaniel promised quickly. "I won't." The doctor nodded, gesturing toward the hallway. 5 minutes. Nathaniel walked down the corridor like a man walking into a courtroom where his sentence was already decided. Emily lay in a hospital bed, 4 lines in her arm, oxygen tube lightly placed beneath her nose. Her eyes were open, staring at the ceiling. When she noticed him, her gaze turned sharp, alive with pain. He stopped in the doorway. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Emily whispered, voice dry and exhausted. "So, you finally followed me." Nathaniel's throat burned. "I didn't know," he said. Emily's lips twitched, not quite a smile, not quite a grimace. "You didn't want to know," she answered. And in that moment, Nathaniel realized something worse than losing his wedding, worse than losing reputation, worse than losing money. He had lost the right to be forgiven. The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and quiet. Machines beeped softly beside Emily's bed, measuring things Nathaniel wished he could trade with money: strength, stability, life. The fluorescent lights above made her look even thinner, her skin almost translucent against the white sheets. Nathaniel stood near the door, afraid to get too close, like a man approaching something sacred and broken at the same time. Emily's eyes never left him. They were sharp despite her weakness, full of years that hadn't been kind. "You didn't want to know," she repeated softly. The words cut deeper than shouting ever could. Nathaniel took a slow step closer. "Emily, I swear I didn't know it was this bad." She let out a breath that sounded like a tired laugh. "You thought I magically became okay?" He didn't answer. Because the truth was worse. He hadn't thought about it at all. Emily turned her head slightly toward the window. Outside, the city looked clean and wealthy, like a different universe from the one she had lived in. "You left me with $40 and a note," she said quietly. "Do you know how long $40 lasts when you're pregnant and homeless?" Nathaniel's jaw tightened. 2 days, she continued. 3 if you're lucky. After that you start choosing between food and shelter. And shelter doesn't always mean safe. His hands curled into fists. "I went to shelters," Emily said. "Some were full. Some were dangerous. Some turned me away when my belly got too big." Tears pooled in her eyes but didn't fall. "I slept in my car until it broke down. Then I slept in parks. Then behind grocery stores." Nathaniel felt sick. "I begged," she whispered. "I worked when I could. But being pregnant makes people see you as a problem." He stepped closer, voice shaking. "Emily, I'm so sorry." She finally looked at him fully. "Sorry doesn't fix hunger." Silence stretched between them. A nurse peeked in briefly, checking monitors, then quietly left. Emily's voice grew steadier as if releasing words she had carried for years. "I lost the baby in my 6th month," she said. Nathaniel staggered like he'd been punched. "What?" he whispered. "I fainted at a bus stop," she continued. "I hadn't eaten in 2 days. By the time I got to the hospital, it was too late." Her hands trembled slightly under the blanket. "They told me stress and malnutrition caused it." Nathaniel's breath came uneven. "Our baby," he said softly. Emily closed her eyes. I held him for 5 minutes, she whispered. 5 minutes before he stopped breathing. Nathaniel covered his mouth, eyes burning. I named him Caleb. The name echoed in the room like a ghost. Caleb. A life he never met. A future he erased. I was alone, Emily said, opening her eyes again. You know what it's like to hear your baby cry and then go silent when there's nobody holding your hand? Nathaniel shook his head slowly. No, she said. You don't. Because you were probably signing contracts somewhere. He dropped into the chair beside her bed. Tears finally escaped his eyes. I ruined you, he whispered. Emily stared at the ceiling again. No, she said softly. You ruined the life I could have had. The words were worse. Outside the room, voices echoed down the hallway. Nurses, doctors, visitors. But inside, time felt frozen. Nathaniel wiped his face. Why didn't you find me? She turned back to him, her expression hard. I tried, she said. For months. Your number changed. Your email bounced. Then you were suddenly rich. She laughed bitterly. You were on billboards. In magazines. On TV. I sent letters to your company. No response. I called offices. They blocked me. Her voice rose slightly. Do you know how humiliating it is to beg receptionists to let you speak to the man who used to kiss you goodnight? Nathaniel lowered his head. I realized something, Emily continued. You didn't disappear. You erased me. He swallowed painfully. I didn't think you'd survive without me, she said quietly. And when you did, you didn't care how. A knock came at the door. A doctor entered gently. Miss Carter needs rest, he said. Her body is very weak. Nathaniel nodded quickly. Of course. The doctor left. Nathaniel stood slowly. I'll be here, he said softly. Every day. I promise. Emily studied him, her eyes searching for lies. Promises are easy when you're rich, she said. He nodded. Then I'll prove it with actions. She didn't respond. As he turned to leave, Emily spoke again. Nathaniel. He turned back. You lost your wedding today, she said calmly. Yes. You lost your reputation, she added. Yes. She met his gaze. That's nothing compared to what you took from me. He nodded slowly. I know. He walked out of the room feeling smaller than he had ever felt in his life. Outside, his phone buzzed non-stop. News alerts, messages from business partners, Isabella's angry texts. Billionaire's wedding halted by homeless woman. Past scandal surfaces at luxury ceremony. Who is Emily Carter? His world was exploding publicly. But none of it hurt like the private explosion in that hospital room. He leaned against the wall and closed his eyes. 4 years, he had believed success erased failure. Now he understood something cruel. Success had only hidden it. And the bill had finally come due. By morning, the story had spread across the entire country. Nathaniel didn't need to check his phone to know it. The constant vibration against his thigh felt like a swarm of angry bees. When he finally looked, there were over 300 notifications. News alerts. Messages. Missed calls. Headlines stacked on top of each other like bricks. Billionaire's wedding halted by homeless ex-lover. Poor woman claims he abandoned her while pregnant. Who is Emily Carter? The woman who shocked Silverbrook. Photos of Emily collapsing flooded social media. Photos of Nathaniel kneeling beside her. Slow-motion clips of security reaching for her arms. The internet had decided 2 things already. Some people called Emily a liar chasing money. Others called Nathaniel a monster who destroyed a young woman's life. Neither group knew the full truth. But the truth no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the world. Nathaniel sat alone in the hospital hallway, suit jacket tossed beside him, tie loosened like he'd been strangled by his own success. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. He only watched the door to Emily's room. A nurse walked by and glanced at him with recognition, the same mixture of curiosity and judgment he was starting to see everywhere. Whispers followed him. That's him. The billionaire. The one from the wedding video. For the first time in his life, His name didn't bring admiration. It brought accusation. His phone rang again. This time it was Isabella. He hesitated, then answered. "What?" he said quietly. Her voice was shaking with rage. "Do you have any idea what you've done to me?" Nathaniel closed his eyes. "The wedding is cancelled," she continued, breath fast. "My parents are furious. The donors pulled out of our charity gala. My friends are sending me screenshots like I'm some joke." "I'm sorry," Nathaniel said. "You're sorry," she screamed. "You humiliated me in front of the entire country." "She was dying, Isabella. That's not my problem." The words hit him hard. "That girl destroyed my life," Isabella continued. "And you let her." Nathaniel stood up slowly. "No," he said firmly. "I destroyed hers first." Silence. "You never told me about her," Isabella said in disbelief. "I was ashamed," Nathaniel replied. "And selfish. And now you're choosing her over me?" Nathaniel looked through the glass window into Emily's room. She lay still, sleeping, pale, fragile. "I'm choosing responsibility," he said. Isabella laughed bitterly. "Then you can keep your guilt and your homeless girl. We're done." The call ended. Nathaniel didn't feel relief. He felt the weight of consequence. A tall man in a gray suit approached him, his legal advisor, Martin Hale. "Nathaniel," Martin said quietly, "we have a serious situation." Nathaniel nodded. "I know. This woman's story is gaining sympathy fast," Martin continued. "If she decides to sue you for abandonment, emotional distress, child support." "She deserves whatever she wants," Nathaniel said. Martin blinked. "This could cost millions." Nathaniel met his eyes. "Good." Martin hesitated. "Your shareholders won't agree." "Then they can leave." Martin studied him carefully. "You're willing to burn your empire for this?" Nathaniel looked back toward Emily's room. "I already burned her life," he said softly. "It's my turn to feel the fire." Martin sighed. "The press is asking for statements." "Tell them the truth. The full truth will destroy you." Nathaniel nodded. "Then let it." Later that afternoon, Emily woke slowly. Her body still felt heavy, but the dizziness had eased slightly. She noticed the quiet first. No beeping panic. No rush of voices. Just calm. Then she saw Nathaniel sitting in the chair beside her bed, asleep, head resting against the wall. For a moment, she just watched him. The billionaire. The man who had once been a poor dreamer with messy hair and hope in his eyes. Now tired. Unshaven. Broken. She shifted slightly, and the movement woke him. He looked up quickly. "Emily, are you okay?" She nodded faintly. "You stayed," she said. "Yes," he replied immediately. "I will always stay now." She studied his face. "You didn't used to." The words weren't angry. Just true. "I know," he whispered. Silence passed. Then Emily asked quietly, "Did the wedding happen?" "No," Nathaniel said. Her eyes searched his. "Because of me." "Because of my choices," he corrected. She absorbed that. "Everyone knows now," she said softly. "Yes." "They'll hate you." "Yes." "Does that scare you?" He shook his head slowly. "Losing you scares me." Her lips trembled slightly. "You lost me a long time ago." "I know," he said. "But I don't want to lose the chance to make things right." Emily turned away. "Some things don't get fixed. Some things get honored," Nathaniel replied. "With action." She didn't respond. A nurse entered to check vitals, then left. Nathaniel leaned closer. "I'm paying for your care," he said. "I found you a safe place to stay when you leave here. A small apartment. Nothing fancy. Just peaceful." Emily frowned. "I don't want your pity." "It's not pity," he said quickly. "It's responsibility." She considered that. "And if I say no, then I'll respect it," he said. "But I won't disappear again." Her eyes filled. "You don't get to choose when you become good," she whispered. He nodded. But I can choose to be good now. Tears finally rolled down her cheeks. Not loud, not dramatic, just years of pain slowly leaking out. Nathaniel gently placed a hand on the bed near hers, not touching, but close enough to show he was there. I can't undo the past, he said softly, but I can spend the rest of my life trying to repair what it broke. Emily closed her eyes. For the first time since the cathedral, she didn't push him away. And that tiny shift felt like the beginning of something painful, but Emily was discharged from the hospital 2 weeks later. Those 2 weeks felt longer than the 8 years Nathaniel had lived without her. He came every day. Sometimes with food. Sometimes with flowers. Sometimes with nothing but quiet company. He listened more than he spoke, learning things about her life that twisted his chest tighter with every story. About nights spent on cold sidewalks. About men who offered help with dangerous conditions. About hunger that made her dizzy. About shame that followed her everywhere. And through it all, Emily never once asked him for money. Not even when the nurse mentioned prescriptions. Not even when a social worker spoke about housing. Nathaniel handled everything silently. When the doctor finally cleared her to leave, Nathaniel was waiting outside with a simple car, no chauffeur, no luxury SUV. I found you a place in East Silverbrook, he said gently. Quiet area. Close to a grocery store and clinic. Emily crossed her arms. Temporary, she said. As long as you need, he replied. Her eyes narrowed. I don't want your riches. I'm not giving riches, he said. I'm giving stability. They drove in silence. The apartment was small but clean. 2 rooms. A kitchenette. A couch by the window where sunlight poured in. Fresh groceries filled the fridge. Emily stared. You did all this without asking me. I wanted you safe, he said. She turned to him sharply. Safety should have mattered 8 years ago. He nodded. You're right. She sighed and dropped her bag slowly. I'll stay, she said quietly. But this doesn't erase anything. I don't expect it to, Nathaniel said. Days passed. Emily rested, slowly regaining strength. She cooked simple meals. She walked the neighborhood. She slept in a real bed for the first time in years. Nathaniel checked in daily, sometimes visiting, sometimes calling. Never pushing. Never demanding forgiveness. But the world wasn't quiet. Reporters camped outside his office. Stock prices dipped. Sponsors pulled partnerships. The empire he built began cracking. Martin, his legal advisor, visited him one afternoon. You've lost nearly $200 million in market value this week, Martin said carefully. Nathaniel nodded calmly. There are board members talking about forcing you out. Nathaniel leaned back in his chair. If they want the company without conscience, let them try. Martin stared. You're serious? Yes. And what about the shelters she stayed in? Martin asked. The conditions she described? Nathaniel's jaw tightened. I want every one of them inspected. By who? By me, Nathaniel said. That week, Nathaniel walked into homeless shelters unannounced. No press. No security parade. Just him. He saw overcrowded rooms. Thin blankets. Children sleeping on floors. Mothers crying quietly. He recognized Emily's stories in every face. And something inside him broke open. He funded 3 new shelters immediately. Not temporary donations. Permanent facilities. Warm beds. Medical care. Counseling. Food programs. Then job training centers. Then affordable housing units. His accountants panicked. His investors raged. But Nathaniel kept signing. Emily heard about it on the news. She watched footage of Nathaniel opening a shelter quietly, no speech, no cameras invited, only reporters who had followed rumors. When he visited her that evening, she studied him carefully. You're changing everything, she said. I'm correcting it, he replied. Why? She asked. He met her eyes. Because your suffering shouldn't exist in a country this rich. She swallowed. You could have ignored me. I did once, he said softly. Never again. Tears welled up. "Money doesn't heal trauma," she whispered. "I know," he said. "But it can stop it from happening to others." Weeks passed. Emily began volunteering at one of the shelters. At first just serving meals. Then talking to women. Then helping children with homework. She had lived it, and people felt safe with her. Nathaniel watched from a distance one day as Emily hugged a young girl who was crying about sleeping in her car. Emily whispered something, and the girl smiled. That moment did more to heal Nathaniel than any success he had ever achieved. That night, Emily spoke quietly. "I don't hate you anymore," she said. His breath caught. "But I don't trust you yet." "I understand," he replied. "Trust is rebuilt slowly," she continued. "Not with money." "I'll wait," Nathaniel said. One rainy evening, Emily finally broke. She sat on the couch, shaking. "I almost ended my life once," she whispered. Nathaniel froze. "After I lost Caleb," she said, "I thought I had nothing left." His eyes filled with tears. "What stopped you?" She wiped her face. "I thought, maybe one day you'd come back and realize what you did." The confession crushed him. "I'm so sorry," he whispered again. She looked at him with tired eyes. "Don't say it any more," she said. "Show me." He nodded firmly. And he did. Months passed. Shelters multiplied. Lives changed. Emily grew stronger. And slowly, something else happened. Hope returned. Not romance. Not forgiveness. But peace. Emily began smiling again. Laughing sometimes. Living. Nathaniel watched her heal, knowing he would never deserve her kindness, but grateful she allowed him near it. One evening she said quietly, "You're becoming the man I once believed you could be." His chest tightened. "That's the greatest compliment I'll ever receive." But he knew redemption wasn't finished. Not yet. Spring arrived quietly in Silverbrook. The bitter winter that had wrapped the city in gray finally loosened its grip, and trees began to bloom along sidewalks that had once felt cold and lifeless. Sunlight filtered through apartment windows again. Children played outside shelters that no longer felt like places of despair, but places of hope. And Emily Carter stood in the middle of it all. She had gained weight. Color returned to her cheeks. Her eyes no longer carried the constant fear of survival. They held strength now, the kind born from pain endured and overcome. She wasn't just volunteering anymore. She worked full-time as a counselor at one of the new housing centers Nathaniel had built. Every morning, she greeted women who reminded her of herself years ago. Scared. Hungry. Broken. And she told them quietly, "You're safe now." Those words healed her a little every time she said them. Nathaniel often visited the centers, but never announced. No press. No speeches. Just presence. He swept floors. Served meals. Played with kids. He had sold nearly 60% of his company by then. Not to grow richer, to fund the programs permanently. News outlets called him reckless. Former partners called him insane. But the people whose lives were saved called him something else. A miracle. One afternoon, Martin approached him nervously. "You've given away more than half your fortune," Martin said. "If you keep going, you won't be a billionaire much longer." Nathaniel smiled slightly. "Good." Martin stared. "You worked your entire life for this." Nathaniel looked across the courtyard where Emily was laughing with children. "I worked my entire life chasing the wrong dream," he said softly. Emily noticed him watching and walked over. "You're famous again," she teased lightly. "For ruining myself," he smiled. "For helping people," she corrected. They sat on a bench together. Silence between them was comfortable now. No anger, no guilt pressing heavy. Just understanding. "You didn't have to do all this," Emily said quietly. "I had to become someone better," Nathaniel replied. She nodded slowly. "You did." A long pause passed. "Nathaniel," she said gently. "Yes. I forgive you." The words landed softly, but their weight was enormous. His breath caught. "You don't owe me that," he whispered. "I owe it to myself," she said. "Holding anger kept me trapped in the past." Tears slipped from his eyes. "Thank you. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting," she continued. "And it doesn't mean going back." He nodded. "I know." She smiled kindly. "You were my first love. But now you're part of my healing, not my future." That truth hurt, but in a clean, honest way. "I'm grateful for that," Nathaniel said. They watched the kids run across the yard. Emily stood. "There's someone I want you to meet." She led him inside the center. A young mother sat nervously holding a baby. "This is Sarah," Emily said warmly. "She just arrived yesterday." The woman smiled shyly. "I heard what you did for people like me," Sarah said to Nathaniel. "You saved us." Nathaniel shook his head. "Emily saved you," he said. Emily blinked in surprise. "You gave me the tools," he continued. "She gives the heart." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Later that evening, Nathaniel walked alone through downtown. His phone buzzed. A message from the board. They officially voted him out of CEO position. He read it slowly, then deleted it. No anger, no regret, just peace. He had lost power, but gained purpose. That night, Emily stood on her apartment balcony watching city lights. Nathaniel joined her quietly. "You okay?" she asked. "Yes," he said. "I've never felt freer." She smiled softly. "You look lighter." "I am." They stood in silence. "You know," Emily said, "Caleb would have been proud." His chest tightened. "I hope so." "I know so," she said firmly. A year later, the Cross Foundation had helped over 30,000 people. Affordable housing stretched across 3 states. Job programs lifted families out of poverty. Emily led counseling teams. Nathaniel managed funding quietly. No fame, no headlines, just real change. On the anniversary of the wedding that never happened, they met at St. Eliza Cathedral. Not inside, outside on the steps. "I used to think that day ruined everything," Emily said. Nathaniel nodded. "I did too. But it saved lives," she added. "Including mine." He smiled gently. "Including mine." They hugged. Not lovers. Not strangers. Family in a way deeper than romance. As they parted, Emily looked at him with warmth. "Go live your life, Nathaniel Cross." "I am," he said. "Because of you." She turned toward the shelter where children laughed. He walked toward the city where work waited. 2 paths. One powerful story of redemption. And somewhere in the sky above, a little boy named Caleb rested peacefully, knowing his short life changed thousands. Not through wealth, but through love, responsibility, and transformation. Sometimes, the people we break are the ones who teach us how to heal. Sometimes, losing everything is how we find what truly matters. And sometimes, God uses pain to create purpose. If this story touched your heart, if you believe second chances are real, and if you love powerful stories that change lives, backhand index pointing right, subscribe now, because the next story might change yours.